Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. As Emily mentioned, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat so that we know who's here and so that you can maybe get to know one another. The way that the presentation is going to work is in a few minutes, Marina Jabsky, our industrial hygienist over at NYCOSH, is going to start with a presentation. And then at the end, we are going to have some time for questions. So the presentation itself is not going to be the full hour, but the presentation itself will be a part of that hour. And then we will go ahead and open it up to questions. And you are welcome to continue to ask questions. If you have them, we will keep ourselves available to you. So, the purpose of today is, of course, as we all know, to address the wildfire smoke and risks to workers. And I saw a couple of people in the chat say we're thankful that the air quality is better today, but we do still want to talk about this issue and make sure we're all on the same page in terms of, what this means for New York, what this means for outdoor workers, what this means for indoor workers, and just New Yorkers in general. We are a coalition of organizations that fights to extend and defend every worker's right to a safe and healthy workplace. You can check us out and you can sign up for our email list at NYCOSH.org. Again, it's www.nycosh.org. If you have immediate questions and you're not sure who to address them to, our phone number is on our website, but it's 212-227-6440. Again, it's 212-227-6440. And you also have the ability to schedule trainings if you need a specific training, perhaps about this issue, perhaps about something else. We're not industry specific, and we train workers in many different industries, although we do have two schools, a construction safety school and a nail salon worker school. With that said, I am going to pass it over to our industrial hygienist, Marina Jabsky.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again. Happy to see everyone here. I am going to start my start sharing my screen shortly. So let me just do that. So we do have some slides. Before I do that, let me also drop our fact sheets into the chat so that you all can have them. I know Charlene has shared them to the PWA group. So if you're part of that, you have already received them. So we have the fact sheets in English and in Spanish. So both of them are in the chat now. Feel free to download them. Also in the chat, I've dropped the link to the to our website, so you can sign up for the email alerts.
Marina?
Yes, dear.
Sorry, 1 second. I'm hearing from one of the Spanish speakers that they can't hear. So maybe we could do a quick check just to make sure. Emigdio?
Okay, so everybody can hear me now, yes? Good, beautiful. All right, so thank you everyone for your patience. Thank you for joining again. So I am going to start sharing my screen. Yes, if I can find it, thank you. Okay, so we have some slides. The slides will be available. I know that not everyone is able to download or see the fact sheet in the chat. We will email that out. We'll make, again, the recording available. So the fact sheets, the slide deck, the recording, you'll have all of that. Do not stress, we'll have that for you. So those will be there. But in the meantime, here we are. So this is obviously we are here in response to the recent smoke and air quality advisory that we have seen. So first things first, right? Just to make sure everyone's on the same page with what the smoke and the air quality health advisory is about and what that means for us, right? So the air quality advisory that we have had in place this week is in response to the smoke pollution from the wildfires that have been burning across Canada, and that smoke is traveling south to New York, to Connecticut, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, other regions in the Northeast right now. And the purpose of the health advisory is really so that we know to take appropriate precautions in response to the pollution in the air, right? Now, what are the precautions we should be taking? So, how do we know what those precautions should be, and how are we supposed to gauge what and when to take those precautions? So that is, that is the purpose of this session today. So first things first, right? What is in wildfire smoke and why should we be concerned about it, right? And the answer to that question is quite a lot of things. The main concerns health-wise for us are particulate matter, right? And we're going to be talking about that again in a minute. So that is one of the major components that we are concerned about within wildfire smoke is particles or particulate matter, abbreviated PM, which again we'll talk about, but also gases such as carbon monoxide, such as ozone, PAHs or polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and nitrogen dioxide. Right now, there are a number of health concerns associated with wildfire smoke exposure. There's a study I linked for you here. There is extensive wildfire smoke exposure has been associated with heart-related and cerebrovascular related emergency department visits, especially in adults over 65. But there also, we'll talk about a little bit later, other health-related concerns. There is, I will highlight for you now, with respect to extensive and repeated wildfire smoke exposure. A lot of information, a lot of studies with that exposure has mainly been done, unsurprisingly, in firefighters. So it is a little bit difficult for us to determine how much of that is really applicable to the wider population. So, again, as you've been probably hearing me and everyone at NYCOSH say over the last few years, we are very much still learning a lot of this stuff, but we do know some of these things. Again, smoke in general, wildfire smoke in particular, we do know that there are respiratory and cardiovascular health effects that we should be concerned with. Okay, now some terms you probably have been seeing both in the news and media, and also in variety of fact sheets you've probably seen circulating already that I want to make sure we are all very clear on. PM 2.5 is almost certainly one of the things you've been seeing. So let's talk about what that is, right? So we said that one of the components of wildfire smoke is particulate matter, right? So PM, the first part of this, PM is the abbreviation for particulate matter. Okay, 2.5 refers to the diameter of the particulate. So when we're talking about PM 2.5, when we measure particulate matter, generally we're measuring it in microns. For context, if we're talking about the diameter of human hair, that is usually between 50 and 70 microns in diameter. So not length, but the diameter. So if you're looking at your hair, right, the thinnest point, so that is 50 to 70 microns in diameter. So you can appreciate when we're talking about something that is 2.5 microns in diameter, how very small that is. So when we're talking about particulate matter, PM 2.5, these are particles that are 2.5 microns in diameter or smaller, okay? So those are the sizes of the particles in wildfire smoke that we are concerned about, because those are the particles that when we breathe them in, these are small enough that they can travel down into our lungs, into the deeper part of our lungs, and cause damage to our lungs and also to the lining. Okay, so as far as health effects go, these are the particles that we are concerned with. Okay, so that is PM 2.5. The other term you've probably been hearing about a lot is the air quality index, the AQI. Okay, so this is a color-coded system that was developed by the EPA, and the whole purpose of the system is to communicate the cleanliness of the air. Okay, it has an index scale, and I will switch my screen in a minute to show you the scale and to show you the EPA website where you can find this, excuse me, the AirNow.gov site where you can find this. But the idea here is that you can use this to determine essentially where we are in terms of the level of pollution in the air, right? The higher the scale, the higher the level, the higher the number on the scale, the higher the level of pollution. And the idea behind using the scale is it will help you, it should help guide you in terms of what kind of precautions you should be thinking about taking. So for example, this is not quite the way the scale looks on the website. This is AirNow has the scale, has two charts, one in English, one in Spanish. I just combined them both here so that I can only have to show you one slide, but I'll show you on the website. There are two of them there, so you can whichever one you prefer to use, but this is the way the scale generally looks, right? So again, it's color coded. So of course, it goes from 0 to 500, and then the lower numbers, the lower the number of the scale, the better the air quality. Okay, and so let me just let me stop sharing here so I can show you the website. Give me 1 second. So here we are. So if you go to airnow.gov, first it'll take you to this page here. Let me just make it a little bigger. Everybody can see this, right? Yep. Okay, cool. So if you go into this menu here, you can look at AQI basics, and then it'll take you to it'll show you kind of the same chart that I just showed you on the slide. And then if you want the version in Spanish, this is it will have the version in Spanish. So it is the exact same. It is the exact same chart, same information. So this is the index on the website. And so you have these numbers, and the way, and then if you go to the homepage, it gives you essentially this little tool, and then you enter your location. So for example, we are, well, we're already here. So you enter New York, and it will tell you where we are on the scale. And then you can look at the map if you scroll down, and it will show you the surrounding areas. So for example, you can see as the and as kind of the forecast predicted, right, as the winds are traveling and the pollution is traveling west, right, air is improving a little bit where we are here in the city, but still we have higher levels of pollution still in Pennsylvania, in Virginia. So you can see, for example, if you're curious what is happening right now in Vermont, right? You can look at the air quality in, oops, okay, I guess we can't look at Vermont. So you can look at Burlington, right? So Burlington is doing really well. You can look at, if you could type, right? So you can see depending on where you are, you can use this gauge to kind of tell you where you are on the scale. And then depending on where you are on the scale, what the air quality is, what the level is, you match that with, let me go back to my slides. Wherever, depending on what the number is, you can go back to the chart and you can see what the recommendations are. Does that make sense? Okay. So that is the first chart, right? That is kind of the basic chart. And this just tells you what the air quality is. AQI also has a different set of charts where they provide recommendations for the levels of activities for each set of levels. So that chart looks a little bit more like this. So this one was a little long, so I split it out over 2 slides. And again, I'll show you on the website where you can find them. And also the links for all of these are up here. So when you have the slide deck, you have the links for everything as well. But I will highlight for you now, these recommendations do not really cover workers very well, right? Because when you look at these recommendations closely, these are the same recommendations we've basically been hearing about, staying indoors if you can, avoiding strenuous activities outdoors, avoiding all physical activities outdoors when the pollution is particularly hazardous, which is, not to disparage that. That is very good advice if you are able to do that. But if you are working outdoors, obviously that might be very challenging for you to accomplish if your job is to do strenuous work outdoors. Okay, so that is something to keep in mind. But that being said, that is the AQI recommendations. Those are the resources on the website. Okay, so that is where they are, and those are the links again. Okay, so that's the AQI piece. So let's talk about risk categories, because again, you've been seeing this a lot also. So the risk groups, whoops, sorry, 1 second. Let me just have to have a thing. Sorry about that. So the question then is, who should be concerned, who should be at risk, right? Because both in the air quality alert from New York City and New York State, and also in in these AQI recommendations, you see that there are certain groups who are being put into a higher risk category, right? And so there are groups that are more more at risk depending on the level of pollution, right? We know that, again, these air quality pollution, the air quality alerts, specifically with wildfire smoke, with the pollution in the air, does affect people with pre-existing respiratory and heart conditions, may affect them more strongly, may affect them earlier at lower levels of pollution, right? So when we're looking, let me just show you, come back here. When we are looking at these moderate levels or unhealthy for sensitive groups, right? People who have heart or lung disease may be more sensitive at lower levels than groups who do not have these heart or lung conditions, who may experience no symptoms until we get to higher levels of pollution. Okay, so that is something to be mindful of. Okay, similarly, adults over 65, young children, people who are pregnant, these are the high risk groups, or higher risk groups, I should say, that you are seeing in these air quality alerts from the city, from the state, and these are the sensitive groups that are mentioned in these AQI guides, right? Also in other alerts you may have seen. But something that we also should keep in mind are people who have prolonged exposure, people who are exposed to denser levels of smoke, right? Very often due to their job, people who are working outside or are involved in strenuous activity outside where the smoke is denser, where they are exposed to this air pollution longer, right? These are also people who are at higher levels of risk than those who are able to shelter indoors. Okay, so that is something to be mindful of as well. What are the symptoms that we should be aware of? So these at the mild end, right, we are looking at eye, nose, and throat irritation, sinus irritation, coughing, runny nose, headache, fatigue. But then we start getting to more serious symptoms. chest pain, difficulty breathing, increased heart rate, asthma attack or asthma exacerbation if you are someone who already has asthma, and exacerbation or worsening of existing health conditions. Okay, so that is, again, this is something that can be very serious, especially for people who already have heart or lung disease. Okay, so what can we do? Okay, one thing that, again, you've been hearing a lot, and you're about to hear it again, is to pay attention to the local health reports, such as the alerts you're getting from the city, from the state, and also to the AQI level, the air quality levels, right? These are things that really can help guide you in terms of what precautions you can be taking, what precautions you should be taking, and what you can start to look at and start to do. If you are able to avoid strenuous outdoor activity, then that is absolutely something you can do. If outdoor work is, if that is your job, then advocate with your employer through your union, through your worker center, for modified or light duty. We'll talk about respirators in a couple of minutes, but do look at and do please use respiratory protection. If at all possible, stay inside if you can, as much as you can. Making sure that windows and doors are shut. I know we talked a lot about the air quality. People have been smelling burning outside their windows, right? So keeping windows and doors shut. If it is, especially it being summer, if it is too hot inside, if you have AC, please run it, but make sure to close the fresh air intake if you have it, so that you're not bringing outdoor smoke inside. If you don't have any way to cool down your home, please do shelter in place somewhere where you can be in a cooler space. Use additional filtration with particle removal, but without ionization. And please don't add to any kind of air pollution, like fireplaces in the summer is probably not something people are doing, but barbecuing, smoking, burning candles, right? Anything like that is adding, increasing the burning of particles, not something to be doing at the moment. Okay, so that is on a individual level what we can be doing. Okay, on a organizational level within the workplace, what our employers can do. Again, being mindful of the health reports and the AQI. In New York, obviously, we have not been having, we do not have a lot of history with wildfire smoke and working through wildfire smoke conditions, but on the West Coast, they have quite a lot of experience with this at this point. OSHA has a lot of recommendations. California, Washington, Oregon have a number of workplace standards and regulations at this, both regulations and guidance at this point. So this piece is pretty much straight from OSHA, or California OSHA, their state OSHA. So they recommend using the AQI as a guidance for when and to implement protections and what kind of protections. So the level they're looking at is that level of 151 AQI. Now, again, let me just come back. So they are looking at this level here. So they're recommending to keep AQI below 151. So now, if you notice, people who have underlying respiratory conditions are already, potentially might start having issues at above, at 101 AQI or higher. So that is something to be mindful of, and definitely something to work with an employer, with a union, with a worker center about, because we absolutely do not want to leave out our, our workers who might be in a more sensitive respiratory or cardiac situation or any kind of underlying condition, just because we're only paying attention to that AQI 151. We absolutely want to be mindful of this piece right here as well. Okay. So just be mindful not to leave those workers out. But Cal-OSHA recommends that once we hit that higher AQI, we start using additional measures. Those additional measures could look like engineering controls. So for workers who are working outside, maybe we can provide enclosed structures for them that have air filtration so that they're not working unprotected outside, but they are still doing their work, but now they have a protected structure that does have air filtration. Maybe if we are talking about indoor workers, maybe we provide additional air filtration units for them as well, right? So it would have to be an assessment for that individual workplace, but again, that's something that absolutely can and should be done. All right, so that is physical changes to the workplace. We can also look at administrative controls, right? So maybe we can change the work location depending on if there's if that work can be done in a different physical location, indoors, somewhere else, somewhere that has better air filtration, somewhere that has better air quality. This is also the point at which we would implement modified or lighter work duty, or just change in schedule, right? Maybe that work doesn't need to be done this week that we're having wildfire pollution. Maybe this work can wait until next week when the air quality will improve, right? So again, being mindful of these kinds of things. And additionally, providing access to respiratory protection. Now, I promised you we would talk about respiratory protection. So the recommendation from Cal-OSHA is to use N95s or better, and we'll talk in a minute about why. But the recommendation is for using N95s or more protective air protection, and again, and to encourage the voluntary use of that equipment. And then after, and that is up to an AQI of 500, which is, remember, as high as the scale goes. And then once air quality exceeds 500, then use of respiratory equipment becomes mandatory. So that is the recommendation. I think we can be a little bit more protective. I would encourage the use of respiratory equipment much earlier than that, but that is a model we can follow. Okay, now let's talk about the specifics of respiratory protection. So N95s do seem to be, and let me just grab a couple of N95s that I have handy for you here. N95s do seem to be the most widely recommended respirator for people to use. And for most people, this is going to be probably the most logical, the most sensible choice for both in terms of if you have to be outside for a short period of time, if you are commuting, if you are not engaging in strenuous activity outside, right? N95s are the best choice for that kind of work. However, if you are doing long-term strenuous work outside, if that is your entire day of outside work, then an N95 is probably maybe at the bare minimum of what you should be looking at. But really, I would encourage a higher level of respiratory protection. And I'll talk about why in a minute. But the point at which we're talking about respiratory protection with respect to wildfire smoke cloth and paper masks and loose fitting face coverings are really not going to provide sufficient protection. They are better than no protection at all. But when we're talking about particulate matter, right, when we're talking about these small particles, 2.5 microns in diameter, we really want a good filtering face piece, such as, again, at a minimum, an N95. We can talk about KN95s, but really we want the filtration that these respirators provide. But a loose fitting face piece is just not going to provide that level of filtration, because as we've talked about before, when we talked about a lot the last years about masks and respirators, when you have a loose fitting face piece, the air and therefore the contaminants are going to be getting in around the mask, right? And when we're talking about these small particles, these PM 2.5s, you really want something that is going to be tight fitting, create a seal around your face, and is going to require that the air that you are breathing in is going through that filtering face piece, and that these particles are not coming in, not making it through the face piece, and that you are not inhaling them. Okay. So what then are we looking at? So here are some examples, right? So we talked about, so when we're talking about air purifying respirators, right? So N95s are the ones we're most talking about. So there are a lot of different options for N95s, right? But so I have a couple that I can show you here. Let me just make sure that I am in frame of the camera. So we can have something like this that collapses flat. And then when you can open it up, right? And then you have these, I'm not going to put all of these on, but and then you have two straps on the back, right? We have similar idea. This one is a little bit more of a duck beak when you put it on, but same idea, two straps in the back. Then you have your more classic one, the one on the front, the one in the picture here is kind of your hard shell. Then you have, again, same idea here. You have more of, and you have your two straps in the back. The KN95s, right, that we have seen a lot during COVID, it's the same, the face piece is the same. The difference is that instead of having the straps go around your head, the KN95s, the straps go around your ears. And the difference there is that the seal is not as tight, right? The seal that you get when you're wearing the respirator around your ears, it fits a little looser, so you're not getting that tight coverage around your face. So the face piece, again, the filtration is the same, but you do run the risk of having a little bit more leakage around your face than you would if you have something that tightens around the back of your head. Okay, so that's really the difference between the N95s and the KN95s. Okay, so that's your minimum. But again, if you are working outside, if you're doing a lot more strenuous work, these might not be the best choice, partially because, especially if you're, if you've ever worn one for an extended period of time, you're going to sweat through them. They're going to slip and slide. They're, they get destroyed pretty easily. And also, if you've ever looked at a chart for protection factors, the protection factor of an N95 is lower than for these reusable respirators. Now, I don't want to scare anybody, right? For most people who are not doing strenuous work outside, these are going to be fine, right? But for people who are doing strenuous outdoor work, these are probably not going to cut it for the duration of the fit. So you're going to want maybe something a little bit more like this, right? So this is, I don't know how well it translates from the photo, but this is a much sturdier, right? This is a silicone mask, silicone face piece rather, right? This face piece is reusable. The cartridges are replaceable once they wear out. You toss them, you get new ones, you replace them. So these, I don't have a full face to show you, but these are going to be much more appropriate for someone who is doing strenuous outdoor work than something like an N95. And then again, the full face and the powered air purifiers are steps up. Depending on the work you're doing, that comes back to your evaluation of the work site itself and the type of work that's being done. Probably not for all kinds of work, but if you're doing, depending on the type of materials that are being worked with and the kind of work that's being done, maybe, okay? And then on the right here, these are unlikely things that we need to be looking at unless the self-containing breathing apparatus, this is the equipment that firefighters wear, right? So if you are a firefighter, then absolutely, yes, this is something you should be looking at. But for most of the rest of us, this is not something we need to be concerning ourselves, certainly not, while we are in the normal course of things. Okay, so again, to kind of recap, for most of us who are not doing strenuous outdoor work, the N95 is probably sufficient. For people who are doing strenuous outdoor work, I would really encourage doing an assessment of what the work is, what the risks are. Probably they're going to be looking at the half face, maybe the full face, but that, probably we're still in this area. But that seems to be the recommendation again from regions that have been dealing with wildfire smoke and wildfire pollutions more and have more experience than we do in New York, that those seem to be the guidelines with respect to respiratory protection. Okay. And then last but not least, before we leave it for questions, paid sick leave. So in New York State, we have the paid sick leave law. So what this is about is workplaces that have more than 5 employees must allow workers to take up to 40 hours of paid sick time each calendar year if they are themselves sick or if they need to take time to take care of a close family member who are sick. Workplaces that have 100 or more employees must provide up to 56 hours of paid sick leave each calendar year. This does apply to workers who are working outside, and employers may not retaliate against workers who use the sick time, whether for themselves or to care for a sick family member. So that is something to be mindful of here, right? We do have that time legally under the paid sick leave law. Okay, so I wanted to make sure that we had that as well. Now, that is the end of this. I know that there are a couple of people who were coming in through the presentation. So before I open it for Q&A, I just wanted to make sure I gave a final shout out that if you are not yet signed up for our mailing list and you would like to be, let me just show you where you can do that. I dropped the link in the chat, but if you go to our website, here it is, NYCOSH.org, and you scroll all the way down, here it is, newsletter sign up. Just pop your information in there, and that is where you can sign up. That is where we send out our fact sheets, send out announcements for all of these events. So if you want to be on the newsletter, that is where we are. And with that, let's open it to the Q&A. I think.
Yeah, I can
yes.
help you there, Marina.
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone who placed comments in the chat.
Yes.
Very helpful comments as well, which I'll be summarizing in the end in case people didn't get a chance to look. But I'll start with some of the questions that I saw. And if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat just so that I could put them in the queue here, like in the line. So one person asked if the presentation will be available, Marina.
Yes, so I think I mentioned the beginning, but again, I know people were coming in. So I think our plan was, because this was a very much a not a last minute thing, but public health emergency was announced, and so we tried to hustle and get this out for you. So certainly not everyone is able to make it out on short notice, so we are recording this, and the recordings will be available. The materials will be available, the fact sheets, the PowerPoint presentation slides, they will all be available on that. Actually, I don't know if we're sharing it through, maybe that's a Charlene question, through the
Newsletter?
Or if we're just sending it out to everyone who attended. That I'm not 100% sure about, but they will be shared, yes.
Yeah, we can send it to people who've attended. That's fine.
Okay.
And we'll send it out through our newsletter as well and have it on our website.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you, Charlene.
Sounds good. And the second question I saw in the chat, Mitch Roth said, since it's advised to wear an N95 respirator and the PM is 2.5 for smoke from wildfires, will this face respirator filter these small particles? What size do typical N95 respirators filter PM down to whatever? I guess it kind of like ended there.
Yes, excellent question. Okay, this is on me. I plan to have the chart up with all the sizes, and I forgot to have the chart up. So I'm going to fill some time until I find the chart. But the short answer is that the actually, this reminds me of something else that I wanted to also make sure I highlighted. So thank you for that question, because there's two things that need to be addressed here. So N95s and also the half face with these cartridges, with any cartridges, the P100s, this is a P100 cartridge, but any of the particulate cartridges, the thing that we need to be mindful of addressing there, or need to be mindful in general there, is that all of these are designed for, again, the N95s, the KN95s, the particulate cartridges are designed to filter particulates only, not gases. So they're providing protection from the particulate matter, but not from the carbon monoxide, not from the ozone, not from any of the gases that you are, that are also in the potential, in the smoke pollution. So that is something that we need to be mindful of. There's a study that is linked in the slide deck that talks about that they did a study a couple of years ago. I think it was out in California, that the wearing of an wearing an N95 respirator reduced hospitalization from wildfire smoke exposure by 30%, 30, which I know sounds low, but again, be mindful of, we're dealing with particulate and gases, right? So when we're talking about total exposure, that's not actually that bad, right? So that is the issue. To your question of the size of particles that the N95 protects down to, I'm going to drop that in the chat just so that you have it. But the size is 0.1 microns, with a 95% efficiency. That 95% efficiency, by the way, that's what the 95 in the N95 means. So if you see any kind of filter, any kind of cartridge. So these, by the way, are when you look at these cartridges, these are called P100s. The reason they're called P100s is because their efficiency rating is 99.7% for particles of 0.1 micron size. So that's why they're called P100s. And the N95s, 95% efficiency for 0.1 micron particle size. Hope that answers your question. Also, thank you, kind person who just told me to drink some tea because my voice is clearly going. I will do that.
Thanks, Marina. And another question is, what about the general public? Is KN95 okay? Jeff Hyman asked.
I mean, yeah, like if you're, much better voice, thank you. So yeah, if we're talking about if you're just like running down to the corner store, if you are not spending significant time outside, if you are not engaging in any kind of strenuous work outside, it's just very brief periods of time that you're spending outside, and you are very brief non-strenuous moments, then KN95s, N95s, again, filtering face pieces that are should probably be fine. So yes, I know that I definitely have expressed a favoritism for N95s, but a KN95, the ones with the filtering face piece, but with the ear loops should still be fine. That being said, right, again, do not take this as gospel. I am one industrial hygienist who is not a wildfire smoke expert. We're all learning as we go. That is your disclaimer, but that does seem to be fine. Just, do kind of be mindful of, right, if we're talking about that, if you kind of want to use this as a gauge, if we're talking about the N95 has roughly a 30% reduction rate in hospitalization, figure that a KN95 will be slightly less than that.
And just along the lines, because some people asked about other masks, such as R95, if those are okay.
Oh, okay. So let's then talk about so when we talk about the when we talk about the N, the R, and the P respirators, right? What that really deals with is resistance to oil, right? So if you're talking about, if that's what you're referring to. So for example, when we talk about the N95, right, you can see this is, if you expose this to oil, this is not going to be resistant to oil. That's what the N is about, right? N95 as in not resistant to oil. But when we're talking about the resistance to particulate, that is the N95, right? What we talked about, the efficiency with which it protects against particles of 0.1 micron, particles that are 0.1 micron in diameter. All right, does that make sense? So whereas when we look at something like this guy, you can see if you're in an area where you have droplets that do contain oil, right? Like a mechanical equipment room, for example, this is something that would still retain its shape, would not break down in that environment. So this would be rated, this would be a P, right? So that is what that NRP situation is. So when we're talking about whether thinking about selecting the best respirator, right? You should be paying attention to, unless you are going to be in the situation where you are concerned about oil droplets, you should be looking at that N95, excuse me, the 95 number, not necessarily that NRP situation. Does that make sense?
Great. Just to get things moving along, we do have an in-person question from Kashif Hussein. Kashif, you could put yourself off of mute.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Emily, Marina, and Charlene. Excellent work. This is really good stuff. Quickly, we are in Manhattan, New York City, and one of the questions that people were sharing with us is their experience as they are on a different levels in terms of like sky rises, like, different buildings, different elevation, experiencing different levels of pollutants. So just wanted to ask you, one, do you have any recommendations for folks that are in high rises here in New York City? That's one, and obviously the biggest challenge that we're experiencing in New York City is to predict, right? Because we're at the mercy of which direction the winds are, jet stream is, and etc. And the predictions that the forecast that we're seeing on EPA websites or one of these apps is like for at least 48 hours, not more. So if you want to maybe shine light on those two issues.
Sure. So I actually haven't really, and thank you for that, because I haven't really seen honestly any data about high rise versus street level. I'm not now that you since you brought up, I'm not necessarily surprised, but I just haven't seen any good data about it. So I'm not sure that I can really give you a good, well-reasoned answer besides kind of the standard of, being mindful of being mindful of filtration, making sure again, where the air is coming from or isn't coming from. But that, that again is really something that is probably going to be something we're going to need to square with being in New York City, because we do seem to have an abundance of high rises. But then the second part of your question, I didn't catch the second part. If you could repeat, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure. No, when we're looking at the forecast, just planning things ahead for events or outdoor activities from the government offices, we are not confident beyond 48 hours. And that's because most of the models are up to 48 hours. Is there anything we can do, or do you have any resources? Obviously, these things, we're dependent on the jet stream and the direction of the wind, a little bit angle this way, Philadelphia gets it, New York doesn't get it, stuff like that. So is there anything we can do to predict or at least have something on our disposal to plan things out beyond 48 hours?
Yeah, that's Kashif coming in with the tough ones today. I say kind of in the same place as you, right? I didn't really have a I'll be honest, when we had the announcement this week, my first response was, what? This doesn't happen in New York. So kind of same idea, is really just I think this is something we're going to probably see more of as as we're unfortunately seeing more of an effect through or more of the effects of the of climate change, is that we're going to have to be a little bit more mindful of what's happening with our neighbors. Also, thank you, Joel Cooperman, for dropping that that article in the chat. But yeah, I mean, beyond kind of just not looking at just I think the New York forecast, but also being aware of what's going on regionally. But even that is going to be, not a fail-safe, because as you said, on the day, a little directional change could mean that it goes to New Jersey and not to us, and we've definitely seen that before. So that, I'm not well versed enough in climate science to be able to really give you a solid answer for that one. I'm sorry. If someone is, I'm happy to punt that one. And it seems Joel is saving me in the chat yet again. So thank you, Joel.
Yeah, thanks to those experts that are also replying to questions in the chat. I realize that it's already 1 p.m. We do have our interpreter only until 1 p.m. I'm not too sure if he would stay a few minutes after or not, but if not, I would be doing a little bit of interpretation with Marina on the side, just because I'm not like on the interpretation side, so I'd have to like work with her. But thank you. If you can't stay past 1, if you can, sure, go ahead. We're still going to ask a few more questions that I see in the chat, and there's plenty of questions coming in, so I'll try and consolidate them because some of these questions were answered.
Also, hang on. I don't know if, because I know Joel, you have your hand up. I don't know if that was a response to the questions that was the conversation that was just there.
Oh, new one. Hello?
Oh, a new question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just, yeah, if it's okay, I'm gonna ask just a few questions that I saw in the chat prior, and then we'll pass it off to you, Joel. Yeah, okay. So one of the questions was, are employers in New York and New Jersey required to act when the AQI is PM 2.5 at the work site is 151 or higher, like California?
So we do not, I can't speak for New Jersey, but in New York, we do not have the requirement for them to do so. In California, they have it in regulation. In New York, we do not. So it's not required, no.
And then another question was, what protections and/or procedures can be taken to protect workers in an indoor facility, specifically around HVAC systems?
So there are a couple of things. We mentioned, again, we mentioned some of them, but kind of the main ones is if you have mechanical ventilation, right? Very much being mindful of, it's a little bit of the reverse of what we were, everything we've been talking about with infectious disease, right? Where we wanted to increase our outdoor fresh air intake. Here, we don't want to do that, right? Because it's the outdoor air that is contaminated. So we want to close our intake of the outdoor air. So for our mechanical ventilation systems, we want to stop the outdoor intake. If we have open windows and doors, we want to make sure our windows are closed. If we are recirculating indoor air, we want to maximize our filtration. So we have, let me actually drop in our Corsi Rosenthal boxes if we, for anyone who doesn't know those. So whoops, not you. So a number of these have been going around, but if you need additional filtration indoors, this is a fairly cheap DIY, do-it-yourself on building a Corsi Rosenthal box, which has been demonstrated to be effective indoor filtration. This has been going around during COVID as well if you need to have additional indoor filtration, but this is something that, again, maximizing the filtration piece, right? So that's the main deal. So those are, I would say, probably the two main indoor things. And then again, trying not to increase indoor particle circulation. So I know that we're probably going to be tempted to vacuum all the things. Don't do that, because when you vacuum, you're kicking up more particles indoors. If you absolutely need to clean things, wet wipe. That would be the better recommendation. Don't burn candles, don't burn anything else indoors. So that would be kind of, those are the kinds of things.
Thanks, Marina. And we'll go to Joel,
Yes,
but
and
just
talk-
give me
yes, I'll go
one
back.
second. Give me 1 second, everyone, just because now that we don't have the interpretation, I have to tell those who were in interpretation to switch out of it, just so that we could, so that they could hear me as well. Sorry. So para las personas que estaban en interpretación, por favor, si se pueden quitar del lenguaje de español y regresar a inglés para que me puedan escuchar a mí. Entonces, voy a estar traduciendo para Marina por un momento. So, si pueden hacer eso, y le voy a preguntar a una persona que sí está en intérprete. A ver, sale todo en inglés de cualquier manera. Ok. Ok, never mind. Pero para lo, I'm going to give a summary of what Marina said. Preguntaron si para trabajadores que trabajan encerrado, ¿qué deberían hacer? Y Marina recomienda, así a través de lo que dicen las políticas y los expertos, que no deben usar su sistema que le dicen HVAC, que es como la ventilación general del edificio, porque ese equipo utiliza el aire de afuera. Y si el aire de afuera está contaminado, va a entrar el aire al edificio y ese va a ser el aire que están respirando. Y el punto aquí es que estamos tratando de encerrarnos del aire del humo afuera que viene de los incendios. Entonces tienen que apagar y usar diferentes sistemas de ventilación en el interior. Okay, so that was my translation. And we'll go over to Joel to ask his question.
Thank you. I guess this is a comment and then a question. We've been dealing with a lot of problems at construction sites, indoor and outdoor. And part of the problem is that at brownfields and elsewhere, New York State is only requiring PM10 testing equipment monitoring. And we're getting a lot of places where there's, high emissions of PM 2.5 and much smaller. And we're having problems getting that suppressed. And we're having workers in surrounding sites at NYCHA housing and residents downtown 9/11 areas that are getting hit with this. And I guess my question is, comment is that New York City and New York State health departments are not suppressing dust emissions that are happening now all the time, which has been made much worse by the fires. So there's definitely not enough monitoring that's going on, and also not enough dust suppression that New York City and New York State and DOB can enforce.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I think I'd also add on that like the monitoring equipment as well is just also sometimes hard to get, and it's expensive for like PM2.5.
Right here, we're using this monitor downtown. If you can see it,
Yep.
this is $300. It goes down to 0.1 and it's on Wi-Fi and it sends out the data. So the contractor at the brownfield sites, and this is brownfields are in every neighborhood, they're using one that's just down to 10, okay? But also those contractors are being paid thousands of dollars a week to do monitoring that's insufficient. So we're really trying, and I guess I'm asking everyone here to actually get the state and the city to put monitors into surrounding areas, not just the site. They keep on claiming that also the suppression is enough, that you say that you just need water to suppress, and that's not working, that they're doing insufficiently. So I think I'm just urging everyone to put a little more pressure out there, and even in a professional capacity. But we have the technology that's there. The city and the state doesn't want to do it, and in this case now, I think one thing we've learned after 9/11 is that EPA now is willing to do more and do more backup and even provide equipment.
Thank you for that. I actually have a quick follow-up for you, Joel. Do you find that those monitors are accurate because I know someone who's like trying to also test those particulate monitors that are Wi-Fi enabled that like will send data to your phone, and trying to figure out if they're as good as like the more expensive kind. So do you
I
like,
think
you like
some of the
them?
brands, I'm not pushing any brands,
Yeah.
some are, yeah, but some of them are higher, are
Okay.
definitely up there. And as a matter of fact, we're hooking up with CUNY that has their whole lab testing, but
Mhm.
also they're willing to do training. And I think this might be an opportunity for all of us to do this. And also, I just want to know that we've worked in workplaces where the city has not allowed industrial hygienists to come in. So this is a little bit of a solution, is that we're trying to get these all over the place to have more than just one nodal point. It's many nodal points. I think we could really fight back. But the important thing is that also at these sites, the city is giving us delayed information. It's like after the site. So we're trying to get not just more data, but just more immediate response. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome, Joel. So just a quick interpretation on the comment. I'll do it as quick as I can. En español, lo que acaba de decir Joel, Joel comentó que en la ciudad ya tenemos la calidad de aire no tan buena. Entonces, él comentó que deberíamos presionar a las autoridades a monitorear el aire, la calidad del aire regularmente, para que en el caso de que un fenómeno como el que pasó esta semana pasada suceda, no sea como una como que algo mucho peor, ahora que ya tenemos la calidad del aire tan malo. Entonces, presionar a las autoridades en que deberíamos monitorear el aire con el tipo de equipo que ya tenemos la tecnología para hacerlo y deberíamos invertir en eso. Okay, so that was my interpretation. Thanks, Joel. And I have a couple more questions in the chat, and then I'll go to Laura. Sorry, Laura. So another question that I saw was, so loose fitting powered air purifying respirator with P100 filter cannot protect workers from wildfire smoke?
So,
Loose fitting
yeah,
powered
yeah.
air purifying respirator. Okay.
Yeah, so the loose fitting peppers. So I have two kind of answers for that. The first answer is that I just from looking at it, like I haven't seen a lot of like specific data on looking at specifically the loose fitting PAPRs, the loose fitting PAPRs specifically to wildfire smoke. Not like, so I don't have the numbers for you on whether they are and how effective they are or are not. So for, if you want a study, then I do not, like I have not seen, they might exist. I do not have one in front of me. In terms of kind of the logicking it out, absolutely right. The benefit of the PAPR is that, instead of the what you have with the negative air pressure respirators, right, like the N95 and something like the half or the full face, right, like instead of you yourself breathing, pulling air through the filter, right, the PAPR does it for you and then kind of blows it in your face. But the thing there is that it is still a filtering respirator, right? Which means that it is still you're still dealing with the particulate side, but not necessarily with the gases that are in the wildfire smoke. So that is, again, still something that we need to be mindful of, would be what I'm thinking of. So it might, with respect to, again, if you're looking at the, I'm sorry, I'm just like losing my words right now. If you're looking at the protection factors for respirators, yes, the PAPR is more effective for particulate than the half or the full face. But again, with respect to the gases, right, we're still need to be dealing with that.
With the PAPR P100?
With the
With N95s? With
so the PAPR versus the half face P100s or the N95s.
Okay. So just a quick interpretation for that. Que preguntaron si deberían usar el PAPR, como indicaron en la presentación, que le dicen PAPR, P100 filtro, si puede proteger a trabajadores contra el incendio y el humo de los incendios. Y obvio depende, o sea, si es como media cara completa, el tipo de trabajo que usted hace, si le ajustaron a la cara, así como ella indicó en la presentación de hoy. Okay. And we have just a few more questions before I call Laura. So Laura, if you could give me a moment. If you could just repeat one more time, Joel, maybe in the chat, what's the name of the monitor that you mentioned? Somebody asked that, Marielle. It's one of the questions. And let's see, did I ask this already? Since N95s are not required to be provided to employers unless that, oh no, I did ask that, okay. What can you do when masks are not an option? For example, brass, woodwind players, actors.
Oh, Marissa, that's you, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, Marissa Friedman.
So at least presumably, well, so this is the thing. So the idea though that you would be indoors, right? I would hope if you are, well, I would imagine you would be indoors if you are, if we're talking about the orchestra at that point. So at that point, we're thinking first and foremost, right? Because ideally, right, we're not to get safety one-on-one and bringing the hierarchy back, but ideally we're talking about our engineering and admin controls first. So now we are, if we're inside, right, we have our windows closed, our air intake closed, our filtration going. So at that point, we're probably not wearing, with respect to wildfire smoke, right? We're probably not wearing our respiratory protection indoors anymore. So in, with regards to if you're, you're talking about orchestra players who are, musicians who are using their mouths for their instruments, right? You are then leaning very heavily on that air filtration and not necessarily, not on respiratory protection anymore. Is kind of the much more concise way of saying it. I'm sorry, Emily, for making you translate all of that.
No, it's okay. I mean, you're basically saying that it depends on where you're performing and if they have any like adequate ventilation for it.
Well, if you're indoors, because remember, right? So if we're talking about, because the ventilation now becomes really tricky, right? Because we do not want, we're no longer trying to maximize our outdoor, like our fresh outdoor intake, because we do not want the fresh outdoor air, right? We're done with that, right? Fresh outdoor is not no longer fresh at this current moment. Yes, so we're trying, so we're not bringing in fresh outdoor air. We are We are just trying to filter closing everything and trying to filter what's inside. So there are, and this is where, where I want to be also really careful, not to, not to like promote any particular brand. There are, the last few years, certainly there have been a number of standalone filtration machines that have come on the market. Some of them are certainly better than others. But some of, like, a lot of them, I have yet to see the white papers or, how effective they really are. But generally speaking, you're looking for a standalone machine that has a, that's able to cover a particular area, and you want a, you're looking for a filter that you're able to replace. And
Okay, so just a quick translation. Para traducir lo que acaban de preguntar, una de las personas que están escuchando es una persona, una música. Entonces ella juega un instrumento como tipo saxofón, así como, entonces están tratando de averiguar que si hay opciones de mascarillas para personas que usan instrumentos de música. Y en realidad eso tiene que ver con el ambiente en el que ustedes están. No deberían trabajar, vamos a decir, si hay un evento como el que pasó esta semana pasada afuera, porque estamos tratando de no respirar el aire de afuera, y si están jugando ese instrumento es imposible porque tienes que estar respirando y botando aire. Hay que ver como otro tipo de filtración solamente con la nariz o con la boca, y es casi imposible. Entonces, si no es afuera, depende de la filtración del aire que está en el edificio a donde usted está jugando el instrumento. Entonces, eso significa que tiene que ver con la ventilación mecánica de la habitación a donde ustedes están jugando el instrumento en ese caso. Okay. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Now I'll ask Laura Miner. If you could ask your question. I know you had one in the chat. That's probably the same one you're going to ask, or maybe
no, different one.
Different one. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And thank you for your translations. I don't understand much Spanish, but I understand you better than any other Spanish speaker I've come across.
Really?
My
Wow.
question, yes. And I'm very grateful. This whole thing is very wonderful. My question is about the obstacle to getting people to protect themselves. I'm very sensitive to things in the air. So I would put a mask on before other people would. Even when the levels are dangerous, I hear people say things like, oh, it doesn't bother me. And so I was wondering, is this with the forest fire, air pollution? Should people be encouraged to go by the numbers? Is there, if they're not, I imagine that by the time a person feels like, oh, I should have been wearing a mask, that there's damage done. Can people sense for themselves when they should be wearing masks? And should this become part of the educational component? And should one be telling the mayor to urge people to follow certain indications like that? Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And also lovely to see you. I know we've spoken before about the virtual sessions. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, I think our NYCOSH's recommendation, and I think pretty much most people that I've spoken to generally kind of in the field, the recommendation is that we should be going by the numbers and not relying on, oh, I smell X contaminant, or I'm starting to feel this symptom or not, because yeah, as you said completely, by the time we start feeling things, you know, it might be too late, and people have different, you know, people have different sensitivities, different thresholds. That's one of them. But they're also, you know, it's wildfire smoke aside, right? Depending if we're talking about, I know someone in the chat, I didn't have a chance to respond, but someone in the chat mentioned chemical contaminants. There are chemicals that have, you know, the threshold at which you smell the chemical and the threshold at which the chemical does damage are very different. And by the time you start smelling it, the threshold for damage, you've already crossed it, right? So there are things like that. There are some things that you will never be able to smell or feel, but they're going to hurt you all the same, right? Carbon monoxide, no odor, still going to impact you very seriously. So, you know, I would never recommend waiting until you start experiencing symptoms before you start taking precautions. So very much, you know, my recommendation would be absolutely going by the numbers, especially if you know, and this is again why we recommend looking at what the, what the public health announcements are, what the AQI levels are, what the, what's going on in the area, literally which way the wind is blowing, right? So looking at what's going on and making an assessment based on that, because that's, how, what's, that's the best way, I would say.
I was thinking more in terms of public education, because I know this from ergonomics. People, working with the computers will say, oh, I'll stop when I can't, when it hurts too much to work. And I say it's like sunburn. By the time you feel something, there's a lot of damage. So I was thinking this is a component of masks and what we've seen in the past few days.
Yeah, I mean,
like if the sky doesn't look orange red, then people think, oh, it's safe enough,
I mean, yeah, same answer. We definitely all around could improve in terms of preventative education and preventative care. So for sure, yes, but yeah, that would be the recommendation, I think, from our end.
Thanks, Laura. So a quick translation, and then I will take about 2 more questions. I think I saw a few in the chat, and we'll end it here. It's been a very productive and nice conversation. So real quick, I'll be speaking in Spanish. Okay, Laura acaba de preguntar que con eventos como este y quizás con la pandemia, si hay una manera de que uno puede educar al público en cómo usar las síntomas que uno desarrolla durante un evento así, o al ver el cielo que se ve de esta manera, o el aire que se ve de esta manera, o que uno respira algo y se siente de tal manera que uno debería saber a ponerse una máscara. Entonces ella está preguntando si hay una manera que podemos decirle a las autoridades, o sea, para educar a los demás, al público, en cómo uno puede identificar que estamos en un tipo de desastre como hemos experimentado esta semana pasada. Marina respondió en que sí, eso es muy importante, o sea, acabamos de vivirlo esta semana pasada, pero habían cosas obvias que uno sabía que estaba pasando algo raro, que el cielo se puso, o el aire se veía raro, el cielo estaba naranjado, que uno huele como algo que se está quemando. Entonces uno sabe que se debe tapar la cara, pero entonces sí hay cosas como el monóxido de carbono que no se puede oler. Uno no sabe identificar, ponerse una máscara o llamar a 311 o hacer una medida preventiva. Entonces ahí es que se complica, pero con este tipo de fenómeno que uno lo ve y lo huele, ya uno sabe que deberían ponerse una máscara y es algo que deberían informar al público. Entonces eso es lo que estaba hablando Laura, que uno debería ahora mencionar quizás a escuelas para jóvenes, a todos los adultos, incluirlo en un currículo, algo así. Entonces, okay, that was my summarized translation. And I'll take a couple more questions from the chat. Thanks for everyone, sticking by and listening in. Another question was about cars. So most cars have the option to recirculate air instead of bringing it in from outside with or without the air conditioner on. I assume the same recommendations as indoor air circulation apply, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Short one.
Yeah, I'll translate that real quick. Una persona preguntó que si en carros cuando recircula el aire, que si hay una manera de apagar eso y solamente usar, o sea, y sí, que las recomendaciones todavía aplican para recirculación de aires en el carro y sí, es cierto. Another question is, have you seen any information on additional contaminants in the wildfire smoke due to the firefighting agents that have been used to suppress the wildfires?
I've seen, short answer, yes, I've seen a little bit. But again, a lot of the information and a lot of the studies that I at least personally have seen has centered around effects on firefighters and not so much effects on general public. So there's a lot, there's a lot of data about health effects for firefighters for sure, but I don't know that I'm able to really translate that into health effects for general public and non-firefighters based on those studies.
Okay, and quick translation. La pregunta era que si hay información adicional sobre contaminantes que tiene el humo de incendios por esto de los bomberos y agentes que bomberos usan para parar los incendios. Y ella, como Marina mencionó anteriormente, que ella solamente va debido a los estudios que ponen afuera en el público sobre cómo están impactados los bomberos usualmente durante los incendios y tratando de parar los incendios. Entonces sí se necesitan más estudios y al momento no se lo aplicaron al público general y quizás ahorita con este evento van a estar haciendo estudios. Okay. Oh yeah, and then Laura Miner, she asked if there's personal portable HEPA air filter machines.
I saw that, Laura. I'm gonna have to. I think I'm gonna have to look at those and maybe reach out to you directly on because I'm off the top of my head. I'm not really sure how those would be. At least what I'm understanding from the question. I'm not sure how those would be different from respirators, unless I'm just like not understanding your question correctly.
Okay.
But let me reach out to you separately, because I know we're like trying to to wrap up, but let me reach out to you, because I think I'm just like maybe not understanding your question.
Okay. Yeah, so real quick translation. Alguien preguntó que si hay un tipo de filtro que sea portable, que uno puede utilizar en el caso de que bueno, adentro, en edificios y también afuera. Y en realidad eso no sería algo diferente a un respirador, media cara o cara completa, pero que ella necesita aclarar un poquito con la pregunta y en realidad tenemos que terminar ahorita. Entonces, si tienen más preguntas, nos pueden mandar a nosotros que tenemos en el sitio web los correos de todos los trabajadores aquí o directamente puedes mandar una pregunta sobre este tema o otros temas que tienen que ver con salud y seguridad ocupacional. Okay, so thank you to everyone. I'm not sure, Joel, I know I see your hand. I don't know if it's a hand from before. It's a hand from before. Okay. So yes, I think we're going to end it right here. Thank you everyone for all of your questions. They're great questions, things that some of the questions we probably have to do a little bit more research on. And very sorry about earlier. I think we're going to cut that from the recording. Not, I think, I know. If it is part of the recording when we had the hacking incident. So our apologies about that. But thank you so much for joining us today. And there was plenty of good resources that were put into the chat. Articles, websites. We have the airnow.gov website. So if you could take a moment just to copy those, maybe we could distribute them in the end along with the PDFs. But they're very useful articles. Thank you to all the experts here who also helped answer the questions that were asked in the chat. And Marina, not sure if you would like to say anything.
I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who joined us. Thank you for everyone who, I know the chat was super active. I obviously, while I was talking at first, I was not reading the chat while I was screen sharing, but I saw it was super active. And just, thank you for everyone who was sharing information, talking to each other, and just being super active. We are at 40 minutes past when we were supposed to end. So, that's a testament to everyone who, who stayed on and was, is like actively still here. So huge thank you for that. Charlene, I don't know if we have evaluation forms handy.
I do not have eval forms, but I think that is all right.
Yeah, I think we were just like so excited to get this out. We're just, but I think we're happy to email them to folks because I think about half of our audience already left anyway. So we're just happy to email them along, I think, with with everything, all the materials. But again, huge thank you for everyone. I really appreciate it. Thank you for everyone who was actively participating. Thank you for everyone who was quietly participating. Thank you for everyone who was here. Just really happy to see you all. And until next time.